Hi, while researching this, the number of times I just whisper Defenders in casual conversation is borderline obnoxious. Andrew, and this is Gayties Toys. On today's MIA 80s Ladies, while this show, tends to cater to Gen X, some elder millennials, this is really the first kind of infiltration of OK boomers. So let's just get right into 1986's Defenders of the Earth's Jedda. Defenders. The premise of the series is really that Ming the Merciless has completely, repleted all the natural resources of his home planet and is now looking at Earth to do the same. So a bit of a environmental message already kind of baked in here. It really boils down to Ming's nemesis Flash Gordon, alongside his good friends for the first time ever, Mandrake the Magician, his special assistant Lothar, and the Phantom, to form a team alongside their kids to stop Ming. As mentioned up top, these were your daddy's heroes. I mean, these were very much kind of, boomer heroes that at least Marvel and King's Feature Syndicate wisely sort of did the 80s thing of creating sort of kid sidekicks. In this case, their legacies, their children who would go on to become the next version of these characters. So at the very least, they sort of, recognized who these characters are, who these characters were really for, but at least try to update it with, sexy new kids. Of these characters in question, and really the topic of today's video, is Jedda Walker. Initially, she was conceived of as Jedda Gordon. She was going to be Flash Gordon and Dale Arden's daughter, but that eventually got transformed into Rick Gordon, who would be sort of a love interest of Jedda subtly. Jedda herself would be the daughter of the Phantom. We have no idea who the mother is, but at the very least, she was, sort of in the Phantom sort of color scheme. She wore just a jump black suit, but had some very kind of purple highlights in there. She was, like many women before her and after her, the chick with the chick powers, mental powers, psychic powers, connections to animals. Very Chitara, very Sorceress, very Counselor Troy, half the X-Men. I mean, this is a little dated even by this point, but, the legacy of chick powers continues. Jedda did have one specific animal friend that was always by her side, and that being her panther, Kisa. At the very least, Kisa was not a talking animal with a sassy gay accent, so small victories there. And I gotta say, I mean, like, the psychic powers aside, I mean, having mind control powers of a panther is at least in my top 10 most wanted powers. With comic book and pulp characters with as rich histories as this is, you would think, where are the other women from these specific comic books? And we'll get to one in particular in a moment. One that I was kind of, surprised not to find in it was Opal, who was Lothar's girlfriend. She, as far as I can tell, was never even mentioned in the show, but I mean, one could at the very least assume she's the mother. The other far more famous character, of course, is Dale Arden, the longtime love interest of Flash Gordon. She did actually appear in the first episode as the mother to Rick Gordon. The two of them were captured by Ming the Merciless. The Defenders did try to go rescue her, but she was killed in the process of, being tortured, which, kids show. Her Saturday morning death would be kind of waved away in the sense that her, essence, her soul would be transferred into, a supercomputer that the Defenders typically checked in on by the name of Dynac-X. It was voiced by the same actress. But I mean, it was pretty hardcore for a main character, the grand mammy of most sci-fi women since, to be killed off in Saturday morning. So kind of hard edge, and also kind of very much, fridging women for the advancement of male characters wasn't quite, the term wasn't coined yet, but this is very much in that family. As the cartoon aired, Galoob had produced toys in 1986 for the Defenders of the Earth, but very specifically the Defenders, the four main characters, some villains, a really cool kind of dragon snake from Ming the Merciless, as well as some very kind of uninspired vehicles. It's unknown, thankfully, thanks to Galoob, basically. We generally don't know what they're up to. We often see, interviews, concepts, things from, the likes of like Kenner or Hasbro. But Galoob, I mean, they keep that thing unlocked. So there's really no memos, no prototypes, no real, information out there of what would have and could have been Wave 2 had this really exploded. So we can sort of sit here and bemoan that Jedda Walker specifically wasn't made, but frankly, none of the kids were made. So it's kind of, really a catch-all where, had the line succeeded, perhaps we would have gotten Jedda and the other kids. But as it stands now, coulda, woulda, shoulda. Defenders of the Earth, despite being, very much kind of like a ploy to, get boomers involved, but also their kids and their kids, it is still, nevertheless, a franchise of the 80s. So it's worth talking about, and it's sort of worth revisiting. So, well, we've never really seen a full relaunch of it. We've seen some comic books over the series, one including one that's happening right now, 2025. As for toys, NECA in 22 started to roll out some characters from Defenders of the Earth. Again, specifically the Defenders. They remade essentially the characters from the original Galoob toy line. I can't decipher whether that's part of the license, that's part of the shtick, that's all they could do. Nevertheless, I sort of walk in here every time and I sort of look at these toys every time thinking, yeah, they absolutely made Jedda, because Jedda herself, even in the cartoon, did briefly wear the Phantom's costume, and sort of, within the lore of Defenders of the Earth is sort of, the next in line to be the Phantom. That said, usually when I find them online, they're customs or, wish listed or what have you. So I always feel like NECA did it, but in fact they didn't. Neither, the costume we generally know her for, nor, a Phantom costume, which would be, frankly, a very easy kind of repaint to do. While the announcement of the figures from NECA seemed to be pretty well received in online circles, I don't know what the sales were. And given the current state of the toy industry kind of shrinking a little bit, I don't think they're going to really kind of jump and do more characters, specifically the kids and a panther, anytime soon. So I mean, if you are a fan of Defenders of the Earth, sound off. Now's the time. But it really was such a cross-generational, strange animal itself, and it's one that it is, very much, belonging amongst these characters. And but I mean, Jedda herself very strictly is part of that universe. She doesn't really exist within other Phantom or Flash Gordon kind of continuity. So she really is linked to this, as are the other kids. And her future as a figure is very dependent on the success of Defenders of the Earth. And that'll do it for Jedda and the Defenders of the Earth. Not, my favorite of all of these. Frankly, even to me, not even that interesting of a character, but when you got a pet panther, I'm in. So I thank you for watching, for liking, for subscribing, all those YouTube things, and I will see you next time on MIA 80s Ladies.